Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard 101 video. Today, we're going over something special. Waterworks gear versus Wintertusk crafted. Now, you may be asking, Noah, why are you doing this? You're either asking that because you've already done it in the past, or B, because you don't understand what either Wintertusk crafted is, or why it's comparable to Waterworks. So, today, I wanted to go into the difference between the two, whether it's worth it to get one over the other, and whether you need to actually farm for Waterworks gear, because farming for Waterworks gear is a process. If anyone could skip that process, it might be worth it. So I'm going to teach you how potentially you could, if you wanted to, through this video. So without further ado, let's get started. So starting with an introduction, if for some reason you didn't know, obviously come level 60, you usually get the Waterworks gear. Waterworks gear is a very, very solid and balanced set of gear that will last your character all the way from level 60 to 100 when you get Darkmoor gear. There's really no reason to upgrade to anything else between because Waterworks is simply that good that it can carry you all the way through Arc 2 with absolutely no problems. Now, Waterworks has been standard for many years since the dungeons come out. I'm sure almost all of us used it from level 60 to 100, and it's just overall solid. But what if I told you that there was another option? There's another option beyond Waterworks gear, and that is Wintertusk crafted. Now, if you don't know, in Wintertusk, there's this nice little guy here called Carrick's Strong Thread. He's in Switzerland, so you need to do Wintertusk first, and I believe you need to be a Grandmaster Crafter to actually craft this. So if you already have both of those things done and you're around the level 56 to 60 range, you'll be perfectly fine. If you're not, however, maybe you just want to farm for Waterworks. But the gist of it is that this guy gives gear that is comparable to Waterworks. The gear is very similar, so let's actually compare the stats. I made a handy-dandy spreadsheet, as I usually do, and filled it with some cool little info. Boom, here you go. Here is the Wintertusk crafted compared to the Waterworks gear. I laid this info side by side, taking the most important stats from each to compare them. Now, what I want to go over in this section of the video is the actual stat comparison and whether it's worth it just purely based on stats and which ones are worth it. So broadly, let's point out the major weakness of the Wintertusk crafted gear, and that is the resist. On every single wizard in every single gear set, the resist is massively lower on the Wintertusk crafted than the Waterworks gear. So if you want to go for a more resist based setup, if you're scared of dying a lot, then already the Wintertusk crafted probably isn't the gear set for you. But let's go into the more specifics of it and go into which schools, just purely stat wise, I think can get away with Wintertusk crafted. So fire, you can see the most important stats for fire are damage, which it's only 1 damage less, so that's fine. The resist is massively lower, as I said. The accuracy is 16 versus 19. Either way, you're still going to be able to fizzle with your fire spells. The difference is only 3 accuracy, and the difference between fizzling 9% of the time and fizzling like 5% of the time is barely anything, despite what you may think. So there's that, and then critical is basically the same. So I will say for fire can definitely get away with Wintertusk crafted and can do it instead of Waterworks. I would say fire's main stat of value is damage, and you can see the damage is literally almost exactly the same. So in this case, definitely fire can totally get away with it. Next up is ice, and ice is actually one I would say can't get away with it and is one of the few that really can't get away with it. And that is because ice's main strength in this game is resist. Your main thing you should be focusing on most of the time is resist, while also having an acceptable damage most of the time. In this case, the damage is similar for both, but the main difference is the fact that Wintertusk crafted gives 19 resist and Waterworks gives 34 resist. That is definitely a sizable difference. With a triple double pet and all that, you could get up to probably about 50 resist with the Waterworks gear, but with Wintertusk, you can only get up to about 35 or so. Obviously, there's a difference there on whether you actually do it or not, but again, that's up to you. And then finally, the stat that I would like to point out is accuracy. The Wintertusk crafted actually gives more accuracy than the Waterworks gear. For both of them, you still have a chance of fizzling, but with 12 accuracy, you could potentially get like an accuracy jewel or something and potentially just cover that up much easier than with 9. But I will say, really, it isn't that much of a difference. I would say Ice probably has the weakest argument for using Wintertusk over Waterworks. So next up here is Storm. And I will say Storm has one of the highest reasons to use Wintertusk over Waterworks. And the main reason for that is that resist simply doesn't matter to them. Resist isn't something that you should be focusing on as a Storm almost at all. I would say, obviously, you might want a little bit of it so you don't die, but do you need a massive amount of resist No. The main weakness with the Wintertusk Crafted is the resist, but everything else is mostly fine. I'd say the main difference here is the 61 damage versus 67 damage. That is a sizable difference, 6%. That could be potentially something that you may want to look into, but me personally, I would probably just use Wintertusk Crafted because I don't think that 6% is enough to actually warrant that. Obviously, it's similar to ice. The accuracy is similar, as in the Wintertusk Crafted is better. Either way, you're still going to have a chance to fizzle, but only a 4% chance to fizzle. Not that bad compared to an 8% at least. Personally, I think Storm could switch over. Next up is Life. And Life, I will say, really, this one is a toss-up. This is up to you because realistically, Waterworks is better for a Life and definitely would be more worth it to farm, but you could definitely get away with the Wintertusk Crafted. Now we come to Myth, and Myth is actually the most interesting of the schools on this entire list because Myth, I would actually say Wintertusk Crafted is just better. It's, in my opinion, simply the better option, simply because there's actually no reason to upgrade to the Waterworks gear. And you can see the reason for that is the difference of damage between the sets is only 1%, so that's not much at all, nothing worth pointing out. The resist is pretty much negligible because as a Myth, you don't really need to resist anyway. It actually might be worth it to just not switch at all and to just stay with the Wintertusk Crafted because it's basically the same gear set. The only difference is that resist, and realistically, I'm going to say it, the resist doesn't really matter. Unless you're a more defensive type school like Ice or Life, it doesn't matter. So Myth Wizards, if you want it, Wintertusk Crafted works. Next up, we have Death, and this one is similar to Life, another toss-up, really up to you. Personally, as a Death, I think resist is less of an important stat because of your heal backs, so you don't really need more resist, and I think that that is something that really rings true, at least to me. And I think that in this case, I would probably go for the Wintertusk Crafted. The main differences between the two are 4% damage, which is pretty much negligible, 1% power pip, which is literally negligible, and then the resist. Really, it's up to you whether you want resist or not. In my eyes, I don't really like resist, so I probably would just go for Wintertusk Crafted. Finally, we have balance, and I will say balance, I would probably go for the Waterworks again. The main reason is that balance is a more defensive school than others. It's, again, a more balanced school than most, and that resist is definitely a little bit more important for a balance than others, especially if you're soloing. So I would definitely say Waterworks is better, but otherwise the gear is pretty much comparable. The power pip doesn't really matter, and then 3% damage is only 3% damage. So that is stat-wise the comparisons between the Waterworks gear. But that's not the only thing the Wintertusk Crafted offers, because there is something else that Wintertusk Crafted offers that Waterworks doesn't. And this is something that I think is worth pointing out overall. Wintertusk Crafted on the hat gives a unique blade. Now you may be like, Noah, why is this important? Well, it's important because the unique blade can be stacked on top of your normal blade. And it's not just any unique blade, it is a 40%. The reason why that's important is that means it will stack on top of a 35% pet blade. So if you have a pet that has a 35% blade and you get this 40% blade, in the case of fire, some of them are actually 40%, some of them like death are 45%, ice is 45%. Realistically, I think storm is the only one that's 35%, so do keep that in mind. Realistically, a lot of these will stack. I personally think that that alone is worth getting the hat. I'm just gonna say, you know what? You don't actually need to get the full set if you don't want to. In my eyes, if you wanted to, you could get the Waterworks robe and the Waterworks boots and decide to get this hat just simply for the idea of blade stacking. Now, the gear gives other stuff as well, like it does give a trap, and you can trap stack. I personally don't think trap stacking in PvE is good at all, so I probably wouldn't. Just personally, I don't think it's worth it. And finally, the boots give an aura, and the aura, the main reason why I would say to not use it is because it costs a decent amount of pips that I think is just personally a waste when you could be blading. So I think that one thing that's worth pointing out is the item card. The item card on this hat is amazing. And I think genuinely it's actually just worth it to get the hat in of itself just for that instead of the Waterworks gear. For the final section of this video, the main reason why you might want Wintertusk over Waterworks, simply it's easier to get. Wintertusk Crafted is ridiculously easy to get. Even if you're behind on crafting, getting up crafting isn't that hard, and then crafting this gear is even easier. I mean, if you just look at the recipe, a lot of this stuff isn't rare at all, and you won't have that much problems getting it. I would say Myth might have a bit of trouble with springs, but realistically the rest of that is easy. There's some nightshade on the balance one, but a lot of these things are simply just easy to get, and that alone could make it worth actually crafting this, simply because it is going to take you much less time to get this than to farm Waterworks, farm through the dungeon, potentially get people who aren't so smart in the run and would mess up your run, or you could just simply do this. That is the main appeal of this, is the ease of it and the ease that you can get it. But that's it. Hopefully I taught you something today. Hopefully you learned. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think Wintertusk is more worth it than Waterworks? What did you go for, or what will you go for in the future? Because I'm curious to know. To put it into perspective, on my Myth, which is now level 130 something, I used Wintertusk crafted all the way up to Darkmoor, and I even used it a little bit past where I should in Darkmoor because I was too lazy to get the full Darkmoor gear right away. So I finished all of Chrysalis with Wintertusk crafted gear, and it's definitely a feasible option. You can as well. I'm just curious to know what you think. But that's really it for today. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Adios.